Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Silmarillion Sunday, part 17. For those of you that are watching as the video comes out, sorry we've been away for so long. We've had Sunday after Sunday of other things that we have needed to do in our schedules, but it is good to be back. For those of you watching in the distant future, glad you're still with us. I'm glad all of you are still with us after this. I cannot believe we have done 17 parts of this. When we last left off, it was the big one, my favorite chapter of Beren and Luthien, about 20-ish or so pages. I think it was something like a 2.5 hour stream. Thank you all for sticking with it. We are going to continue on to chapter 20 of the fifth battle. The fifth battle is probably the saddest. Get ready. Maybe bring tissues for yourself this time. Of the fifth battle, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad. It's my own pronunciation. Some people do it a little differently. When we last left off, though, Beren and Luthien had both come back from the dead. Spoilers, but if you're here at this point, you've probably seen it. Also, that's not the biggest spoiler in that book. So the war between the elves, humans, dwarves, and Morgoth, Sauron's master, was not going well. It was basically everything north in the northern part of Middle-earth is gone. So a lot of people are scattered, a lot of kingdoms are in ruin, there's a lot of problems going on right now. We had a little bit of a break with Beren and Luthien, but we are going to get back into it. All right. Actually, I hated that intro. So Twitch, I'm sorry. I'm going to do this again and make it much faster. I'm sorry. That was just really bad. I'm all scatterbrained today. Let's get this going. All right. Take two. Dawn, don't forget. 3, 2. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to Silmarillion Sunday. I am Don Marshall72, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy. Welcome to part 17 of our reading of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion. If you're watching this as it comes out, sorry about the delays. We've had a lot of busy Sundays, but we are back, and it is so good to be back. Today we will start with chapter 20 of the fifth battle, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad. Chat, Twitch, if you want to say hi, please do so now. If you're watching this on YouTube and you would like to catch a live stream, these are now going to be Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That would be, I believe, 4 p.m. GMT. And on the West Coast, it would be 8 a.m. A lot of people watch this back in other ways, so no worries if you cannot catch it. We are going to go ahead and get started. As you'll remember, last time we stopped at Of Beren and Luthien, just sort of my favorite chapter. Almost a 2.5 hour stream. Thank you for sticking with us. But in terms of story, that was sort of like a one-shot where it kind of stays on its own. But suffice it to say, Morgoth lost one of the Silmarils. He still laid waste to a lot of Middle-earth. And so we are coming back from that. And it's only going to get worse. Remember in the very beginning when I said a lot of people don't make it in this story? Welcome to chapter 20, where nothing good happens. Chapter 20 of the fifth battle, Nirnaeth Arnoediad. Let's begin. Quick side note before we begin. The beginning of chapter 20 I have actually already read, because the continuation of Beren and Luthien's story continues into chapter 20. I am going to reread it because it includes a little bit of it's like an epilogue for the Beren and Luthien story. So let's continue. It is said that Beren and Luthien returned to the northern lands of Middle-earth and dwelt together for a time as living man and woman, and they took up again their mortal form in Doriath. Those that saw them were both glad and fearful, and Luthien went to Menegroth and healed the winter of Thingol with a touch of her hand. But Melian looked in her eyes and read the doom that was written there, and turned away. For she knew that a parting beyond the end of the world had come between them, and no grief of loss has been heavier than that of Melian the Maya in that hour. Then Beren and Luthien went forth alone, fearing neither thirst nor hunger, and they passed beyond the great river Gelion into Ossiriand, and dwelt there in Tol Geren, the Green Isle in the midst of the Andurant, until all tidings of them ceased. The Eldar afterwards called that country I found my first hard word of the chapter. Dorfin I Guinar. FIRN-I-GUINAR. Got to do some tongue twisters before I start this one. The land of the dead that live. Ooh, that is a cool name. And there was born Dior Aranel, the beautiful, who was afterwards known as Dior Elukil, who is Thingol's heir. No mortal man ever spoke again with Beren, son of Barahir, and none saw Beren or Luthien leave the world, or marked where their bodies or marked where at last their bodies lay. So, that is the epilogue of Beren and Luthien. The important thing to remember is they have a son, Dior. For those of you that watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the anime, you can refer to him as Dio. That's an inside joke. I think like 6 people are going to get that joke. If you don't, it's okay. All right, here we go. In those days, Maedhros, son of Feanor, lifted up his heart, perceiving that Morgoth was not unassailable, for the deeds of Beren and Luthien were sung in many songs throughout Beleriand. Yet Morgoth would destroy them all, one by one, if they could not again unite, and make new league and common council. And he began those councils for the raising of the fortunes of the Eldar, that are called the Union of Maedhros. Just as an aside, Maedhros, one of the sons of Feanor, probably not so bad up until this point. Just get ready. Yet the oath of Feanor and the evil deeds that it had wrought did injury to the designs of Maedhros, and he had less aid than should have been. Orodreth would not march forth to the word of any son of Feanor, because of the deeds of Celegorm and Curufin. And the elves of Nargothrond trusted still to defend their hidden stronghold by secrecy and stealth. Thence came only a small company, following Gwyndor, son of Gwilyn, a very valiant prince, and against the will of Orodreth he went to the northern war, because he grieved for the loss of Gelmir his brother and the Dagor Bragolok. Remember, that is the really big battle that happened before this. There are 5 main battles that happen between the elves and humans and dwarves and Morgoth. This is the 5th one. Get ready. They took the badge of the house of Fingolfin and marched beneath the banners of Fingon. And they came back, never back, save one. From Doriath came little help, for Maedhros and his brothers, being constrained by their oath, had before sent to Thingol and reminded him with haughty words of their claim, summoning him to yield the Silmaril. Remember from last time, right? Thingol, Luthien's dad, has the Silmaril. He's got one of them. Yeah. Melian counseled him to surrender it, but the words of the sons of Feanor were proud and threatening, and Thingol was filled with anger, thinking of the anguish of Luthien and the blood of Beren whereby the jewel had been won, despite the malice of Celegorm and Curufin. And every day that he looked upon the Silmaril, the more he desired to keep it forever, for such was its power. A weird object in Tolkien's universe that the longer you held onto it, the more you desire it? Fascinating. No, I'm just being silly. Then Thingol fortified the marches of his realm, and went not to war, nor any out of Doriath, save Mablung and Beleg, who were unwilling to have no part in these great deeds. To them Thingol gave leave to go, so long as they served not the sons of Feanor, and they joined themselves to the host of Fingon. You'll remember Fingon is the elven king now. But Maedhros had the help of the Naugrim, the dwarves, in both armed forces and in great store of weapons, and the smithies of Nogrod and Belagost were busy in those days. And he gathered together again all his brothers and all the people who would follow them. And the men of Bor and Ulfang were marshaled and trained for war. And they summoned yet more of their kinsfolk out of the east, because you'll remember, a lot of humans are over in the east still. and Moreover, in the west, Fingon, ever a friend of Maedhros, took counsel with Himring, and the Hithlim of Noldor, and the men of the house of Hador, prepared for war. In the forest of Brethiel, Halmir, lord of the people of Haleth, gathered his men, and they whetted their axes. But Halmir died ere the war came, and Haldir, not the Haldir from the Two Towers and Fellowship of the Ring. This is a different Haldir of the same name. And Haldir, his son, ruled that people. And to Gondolin also came the tidings. And to Gondolin also the tidings came, to Torgon, the hidden king. But Maedhros made trial of his strength too soon, ere his plans were full wrought. And though the orcs were driven out of the northward regions of Beleriand, and even Darthonion was freed for a while, Morgoth was warned of the uprising of the Eldar and the elf friends, and took counsel against them. Many spies and workers of treason he sent forth among them, as he was the better able now to do, for the faithless men of his secret allegiance were yet deep in the secrets of the sons of Feanor. So Morgoth's got spies, basically everywhere. All right, I will pause there. We are 2 pages in, and I will take questions. If anybody has them on chat, I will also ask the folks over on TikTok. If you are interested, we are actually live streaming over on Twitch. I do have a couple new followers to thank. Magnirut, thank you for the follow. Stella Delatore, thank you for the follow. And I think that's it for now, but much appreciated. Thank you for joining. If anybody is interested over on TikTok, though, the audio quality is much better. I do answer questions in chat. Right now, we are sort of so far into the book that I feel like a lot of the questions are less of the sort of basic ones and more of like my opinions on things, which is what I have sort of gotten in the past. Also, Balrog Babe, thank you so much for the resub. You've been subbed to me for 5 months. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We got one from Kia. Was Maedhros the one that was chained to the rock by Morgoth? Yes, he is the... Hang on, let me see if I can find the official description online here. Maedhros is also known as Maedhros the... Is it the one-handed? He has another name, and I'm trying to find it. But yes, he is the one that was tied to the cliff that was rescued by... Oh, shoot. Who was he rescued by? Was it Fingolfin or Fingon? Hang on. Hand. I'll figure it out eventually. Let's keep going then, shall we? But yes, Kia, that is the same elf. At length, Morgoth. I said Morgoth instead of Maedhros. I'm out of practice, can you tell? At length, Maedhros, having gathered all the strength he could of elves and men and dwarves, resolved to assault Angband from the east and west, and he purposed to march with banners displayed in open force of war over Anfauglith. But when he had drawn forth, as he had hoped, the armies of Morgoth in answer, then Fingon should issue forth from the passes of Hithlim, and thus they thought to take the might of Morgoth as between an anvil and a hammer. So they're going to do a pincer attack, basically. One comes from one side, one comes from the other, and Morgoth's army will be in the middle. Also, Joe Nell, thank you for the extension of your sub. I do want to say, though, if anybody is interested, subscribing is both through regular subscriptions. You can also subscribe for free through Twitch Prime. Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you can use your one subscription to... subscribe. You do not have to by any means. It just helps support the channel. So, thank you again. When he drew forth, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go back real quick. And thus they thought to take the might of Morgoth as between an anvil and a hammer, and break it to pieces. And the signal for this was to be the firing of a great beacon in Darthonion. On the appointed day, in the morning of midsummer, the trumpets of the Eldar greeted the rising of the sun, and in the east was raised the standard of the sons of Feanor, and in the west standards of Fingon, high king of the Noldor. When Fingon looked out from the walls of Ethilsirion and his host was arrayed in the valleys and the woods upon the east of Eredwethrin, well hid from the eyes of the enemy. But he knew that it was very great. For there all the Noldor of the Hithlum were assembled, together with elves of the Falas and Gwyndor's company from Nargothrond, and he had great strength of men. Upon the right were the host of Dorlomin, and all the host of Hurin and Huor his brother. And to them had come Haldir of Brethiel, with many men of the woods. So again, you don't really have to remember all of these names, right? These are just pretty much all of the people that we have been hearing mention of in previous chapters. Everybody is coming together. Well, not everybody. There are a bunch that are staying back and not fighting. But a lot of the people that you've heard about are in the process of fighting. Then Fingon looked towards Thangorodrim, which is Morgoth's, lair base. It's 3 mountains, basically, where he is. And there was a dark cloud about it, and a black smoke went up, and he knew that the wrath of Morgoth was aroused, and that their challenge was accepted. A shadow of doubt fell upon Fingon's heart, and he looked eastward, seeking, if he might see with elven sight, the dust of Anfauglith rising beneath the host of Maethros. He knew not that Maethros was hindered in his setting forth by the guile of Uldor the Accursed, who deceived him with false warnings of assault from Angband. But now a cry went up, passing up the wind from the south, from vale to vale. The elves and men lifted their voices in wonder and joy, for unsummoned and unlooked for, Torgon had opened the leaguer of Gondolin. Torgon's coming out. Torgon, for those that may not remember, is the elf that has this hidden city of Gondolin, and he never comes out. A bunch of elves just disappeared. Like, I think it's 2/3 of the elven population just disappeared at one point, and they're all in Gondolin, and they're coming out now. Then, when Fingon heard from afar the trumpet of Torgon his brother, the shadow passed, and his heart was uplifted, and he shouted aloud, I'm gonna butcher this Elvish, I am so sorry. Utulien, you know what? I'm not even gonna try, actually. I'm not even gonna try. But he shouted aloud something. The translation is, the day has come. Behold, people of the Eldar and fathers of men, the day has come. And all those who heard his great voice echo in the hills answered the cry, Auta Ilome, the night is passing. That one I tried. It's still bad. If you ever want to learn how to speak Elvish, go follow Wizardway Chris on TikTok and Twitch. However, a lot of people, myself included, are very, very... They struggle a lot with pronunciation. I struggle a lot with pronunciation. Especially there. All right, let's continue. Now Morgoth, who knew much of what was done and designed by his enemies, chose his hour, and trusting in his treacherous servants to hold back Maethros and prevent the union of his foes, he sent a force seeming great, but yet but part of all that was already made, towards Hithlum, and they were clad in dun raiment, and showed no naked steel. Thus were already seen far over the sands of Anfauglith, before their approach was seen. Oh, is there a chat check? Someone's asking me to check chat. I don't see any questions. That's okay, I'm gonna keep going. Then the hearts of the Noldor grew hot, and their captains wished to assail their foes upon the plains. But Hurin spoke against it, and bade them beware of the guile of Morgoth, whose strength was already greater than it seemed, and his purpose other than he revealed. And though the signal of the approach of Maethros came not, and the host grew impatient, Hurin urged them still to await it, and to let the orcs break themselves in assault upon the hills. But the captains of Morgoth in the west had been commanded to draw out Fingon swiftly from his hills, by whatever means they could. He marched on, therefore, until the front of his battle was drawn up before the streams of Sirion. Sirion is a river. From the walls of the fortress of Ethel Sirion to the inflowing of the rivers of the fen of Serek. Again, you don't have to remember a lot of this. or these places. But there was no answer to his challenge, and the taunts of the orcs faltered as they looked upon the silent walls and the hidden threat of the hill. Then the captain of Morgoth sent out riders with tokens of parley, and they rode up before the outworks of Barad Ethiel. With them they brought Gelmir, son of Gwilyn, that lord of Nargothrond, whom they had captured in the Bragolok, the previous battle. And they had blinded him. And the heralds of Angband showed him forth, crying, "We have more, such at home. But you must make haste if you would find them, for we shall deal with them all when we return, even so." And they hewed off Gelmir's hands and feet and his head last, within sight of the elves, and left him. By ill chance at that place in the outward stood Gwyndor of Nargothrond, the brother of Gelmir. Now his wrath was kindled to madness, and he leapt forth on horseback, and many riders with him. And they pursued the heralds, and slew them, and drove on deep into the main host. Seeing this, all the host of the Noldor was set on fire, and Fingon put on his white helm, and sounded his trumpets, and all the host of Hithlum leapt forth from the hills in sudden onslaught. The light of the drawing of the swords of the Noldor was like a fire in the field of reeds, and so fell and swift was their onset, that almost by designs of Morgoth went astray. Before the army that went westward could be strengthened, it was swept away, and the banners of Fingon passed over Anfauglith, and were raised before the walls of Angband. Ever in the forefront of that battle went Gwyndor and the elves of Nargothrond, and even now they could not be restrained. And they burst through the gates, and slew the guards upon the very stairs of Angband, and Morgoth trembled upon his deep throne, hearing them beat upon the door. But they were trapped there, and all were slain, save Gwyndor only, whom they took alive, for Fingon could not come to their aid. By many secret doors in Thengorodrim, Morgoth had let issue forth his main host that he had held in waiting, and Fingon was beaten back with great loss from the walls. Then in the plain of Anfauglith, on the 4th day of the war, there began the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, unnumbered tears. For no song or tale could contain its grief. The host of Fingolfin retreated over the sands, and Haldir, lord of Halidin, was slain in the rear guard. With him fell most of the men of Brethiel, and came never back to their woods. But on the 5th day, as night fell, and they were still far from Ered Wethrin, the orcs surrounded the host of Hithlum, and they fought until day, pressed ever closer. In the morning came hope, when the horns of Turgon were heard in the march as he marched up with the main host of Gondolin, for they had been stationed southward, guarding the pass of Sirion, and Turgon restrained most of his people from the rash onslaught. Now he hastened to the aid of his brother, and the Gondolindrim, which is what the elves of Gondolin are called. And the Gondolindrim were strong, and clad in mail, and their ranks shone like a river of steel in the sun. Now the phalanx of the guard of the king broke through the ranks of the orcs, and Turgon hewed his way to the side of his brother. And it is told that the meeting of Turgon with Hurin, who stood beside Fingon, was glad in the midst of battle. It's a nice reunion. Because remember, Turgon and Hurin have met before. Then hope was renewed in the hearts of the elves, and in that very time, at the 3rd hour of morning, the trumpets of Maedhros were heard, at last, coming up from the east, and the banners of the sons of Feanor assailed the enemy in the rear. Some have said that even then the Eldar might have won the day, had all their hosts proved faithful, for the orcs wavered, and their onslaught was stayed, and already some were turning in flight. But even as the vanguard of Maedhros came to the orcs, Morgoth loosed his last strength, and Angband was emptied. There came wolves and wolf riders, and there came Balrogs and dragons, and Glaurung, father of dragons. The strength and terror of the great worm were now indeed great, and the elves and men withered before him. And he came upon the host of Maethros and Fingolfin, and swept them apart. Yet neither by wolf, nor by Balrog, nor by dragon could Morgoth have achieved his end, but for the treachery of men. In this hour, the plots of Ulfang were revealed. Many of the Easterlings turned and fled, their hearts being filled with lies and fear, but the sons of Ulfang went over suddenly to Morgoth, and drove in upon the rear of the sons of Feanor. And in the confusion that they wrought, they came near the standards of Maethros. They reaped not the rewards that Morgoth had promised them, for Maglor slew Uldor the Accursed, the leader of the treason. And the sons of Bor slew Ulfast and Ulwarth ere they themselves were slain. But new strength of evil men came up, that Uldor had summoned and kept hidden in the eastern hills, and the host of Maethros was assailed now on 3 sides. And it broke, and was scattered, and fled this way and that. Yet fate saved the sons of Feanor. And though they were wounded, none were slain. For they drew together, and gathering the remnant of the Noldor and the Naugrim about them, they hewed away out of the battle, and escaped far towards Mount Dolmed in the east. Last of all the eastern forces to stand firm were the dwarves of Belegost, and thus they won renown, for the Naugrim withstood the fire more heartily than either elves or men, and it was their custom, moreover, to wear great masks in battle, hideous to look upon, and those stood them in good stead against the dragon. And but for them, Glaurung and his brood would have withered all that was left of the Noldor. But the Naugrim made a circle around him, and he assailed them, and even his mighty armor was not full proof against the blow of their axes. And when in his rage Glaurung turned and struck down Azaghal, lord of Belegost, and crawled over him with his last stroke, Azaghal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. Then the dwarves raised up the body of Azaghal and bore it away, and with slow steps they walked behind, singing a dirge in deep voices, as it were a funeral pomp in their country, and gave no more heed to their foes, and none dared stay them. But now in the western battle Fingon and Torgon were assailed by the tides of their foes, thrice greater than all the force that was left to them. Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, high captain of Angband, was come, and he drove a dark wedge between the elven host, surrounding King Fingon, and thrusting Torgon and Hurin aside, towards the fen of Serek. Then he turned upon Fingon. That was a grim meeting. At last Fingon stood alone with his guards dead about him, and he fought with Gothmog, until another Balrog came behind and cast a throng of fire about him. Then Gothmog hewed him with his black axe, and a white flame sprang from the helm of Fingon as it was cloven. Thus fell the High King of the Noldor, and they beat him into the dust with their maces, and his banner, silver and blue, they trod into the mire of his blood. The field was lost, but still Hurin and Huor and the remnants of the house of Hador stood firm with Torgon of Gondolin, and the host of Morgoth could not yet win the pass of Sirion. Then Hurin spoke to Torgon, saying, "Go now, Lord, while time is, for in you lives the last hope of the Eldar, and while Gondolin stands, Morgoth shall still know fear in his heart." But Torgon answered, "Not long now can Gondolin be hidden, and being discovered, it must fall." Then Huor spoke and said, "Yet if it stands but a little while, then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with the eyes of death, though we part here forever, I shall not look on your white walls again. From you and from me a new star shall rise. Farewell." And Maeglin, Torgon's sister son, who stood by, hearing these words, did not forget them, but he said nothing. Then Turgon took the counsel of Húrin and Huor, and summoning all that remained of the host of Gondolin and such of Fingon's people that could be gathered, he retreated towards the pass of Sirion, and his captains, Ecthelion and Glorfindel, the same Glorfindel from the Return of the King book, I might add, guarded the flanks of the left and right, so that none of the enemy could pass. But the men of Dor-lómin held the rear guard, as Húrin and Huor desired, for they did not wish in their hearts to leave the Northlands, and if they could not win back to their homes, they would stand in the end. Thus was the treachery of Uldor redressed, and of all the deeds of war that the fathers of men wrought on behalf of the Eldar, the last stand of the men of Dor-lómin is most renowned. It was said that Turgon fought his way southward until, coming behind the guard of Húrin and Huor, he passed down Sirion and then escaped, and vanished into the mountains, and was hidden from the eyes of Morgoth. But the brothers drew the remnants of the men of the house of Hador about them, and foot by foot they withdrew, until they came behind the fen of Serek, and had that stream of Reveal behind them. They stood and gave way no more. Then all the host of Angband swarmed against them, and they bridged the stream with their dead, and encircled the remnants of Hithlum as a gathering tide about the rocks. There, as the sun westered on the 6th day, and the shadow of Eredwethrin grew dark, Huor fell, pierced with a venomed arrow in his eye, and all the valiant men of Hador were slain about him in a heap, and the orcs hewed their heads and piled them in a mound of gold, as a mound of gold in the sunset. Last of all, Húrin stood alone. Then he cast aside his shield and wielded his axe two-handed. Hang on one second, the wife is here. Sorry, the wife forgot her key. At last of all, Húrin stood alone. Then he cast aside his shield and wielded an axe two-handed, and it is sung that that axe smoked in the black blood of the troll guard of Gothmog until it withered, and each time that he slew, Húrin cried, "Aure el tuvie and sorry, I'm going to butcher this at a very dramatic moment. Aure en tuvula. Day shall come again. 70 times he uttered that cry, but they took him at last alive by the command of Morgoth, for the orcs grappled him with their hands, which clung to him still, though he hewed off their arms, and ever their numbers were renewed, until at last he fell, buried beneath them, and Gothmog bound him and dragged him to Angband with mockery. Thus ended near Neath Arnoediad. As the sun went down beyond the sea, night fell in Hithlum, and there came a great storm of wind out of the west. I will pause there and take questions, because we've only got about 2.5 more pages left. If anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. That was the near Neath Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. When I told you in the very beginning not to get attached to too many characters, this is why. So Mona has a question. How come my copy of the Silmarillion is so different than yours? You have the same copy as Chris. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure why. It may be that there are different editions that have slight word changes. I also, full disclosure, do mess up sometimes, and just to go with the story, keep going, but it is usually just 1 or 2 words, whether that's a mispronunciation or otherwise. I do try and just keep it going if it still makes sense in the sense of the story. Usually if it's really big, I will stop. But yeah, that is the near Neath Arnoediad. There are dragons and balrogs and trolls, and it is terrifying because when you talk to someone that reads the Silmarillion, you say, oh yeah, everybody dies. This is no better example than this, right? There is treachery, there is malice, there is all kinds of stuff. We lost Fingon, king of the Noldor. A good elf. A great elf, even. This battle is partly one of the reasons why I would love to make the Silmarillion into an anime. And honest to God, I have thought about this more than anything else, because this battle is the culmination of all of those random names that, like, if you're watching this on YouTube in a row, or like you're keeping up with it and you kind of remember the names from 2 or 3 chapters, or you're watching it, 1 episode a day, it's a little bit easier to keep track of. But as we go through all of these names that keep popping up again and again and again, they're all coming together in this battle. And this one is the important one. Yeah, Echo, the symbolism of having the severed arm still clinging to you is quite the symbolism indeed. To make another anime reference, there's a villain in the show My Hero Academia, which is an anime that has hands on different parts of his body that still cling to him, that are, I think, either magically cut off at the wrist or just it's by design. It's a very bizarre looking visual, but it is quite cool to look at. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Also, for anybody over on TikTok, if you feel so inclined, feel free to check out the Discord and the Twitch. The audio quality is better, and we chat. Great was the triumph of Morgoth, and his design was accomplished in a matter after his own heart. For men took the lives of men, and betrayed the Eldar, and fear and hatred were aroused among those that should have been united against him. From that day the hearts of the elves were estranged from men, save only those of the 3 houses of the Edain. The realm of Fingon was no more, and the sons of Feanor wandered as leaves before the wind. Their arms were scattered. Arms meaning like their armies, not actual arms. Because we were just discussing hands and arms, I feel the need to clarify that one. Their arms were scattered, and their league broken, and they took to the wild and the woodland life beneath the feet of Ered Lindon, mingling with the green elves of Osiriand, bereft of their power and glory of old. In Brethiel, some few of the Haladin yet dwelt in the protection of their woods, and Handir, son of Haldir, was their lord. But to Hithlum came never back one of Fingon's host, nor any of the men of Hador's house, nor any tidings of the battle and the fate of their lords. But Morgoth sent thither the Easterlings that had served him, denying them the rich lands of Beleriand, which they coveted, and he shut them in Hithlum, and forbade them to leave it. Such was the reward he gave them for their treachery to Maethros, to plunder and harass the old and the women and the children of Hador's people. The remnant of the Eldar of Hithlum were taken to the mines of the north, and labored there as thralls, save some that eluded him and escaped into the wilds and the mountains. The orcs and the wolves went freely through all the north, and came ever further southward, into Beleriand, even as far as Nantathren, the land of willows, and the borders of Osiriand, and none were safe in the field or wild. Doriath, indeed, remained, and the halls of Nargothrond were hidden, but Morgoth gave small heed to them, either because he knew little of them, or because that hour was not yet come in the deep purposes of his malice. Many now fled in the havens, and took refuge behind Círdan's walls, and the mariners passed up and down the coast and harried the enemy with swift landings. And in the next year, ere the winter was come, Morgoth sent great strength over Hithlum and Nevrast, and they came down to the river Brithon and Nenning, and ravaged all the Phalos, This is basically Morgoth is getting free reign and attacking everybody else. And besieged the walls of Brithombar and Eglarest. Smiths and miners, masters of fire, they brought with them, and they set up great engines, and valiantly, though they were resisted, they broke the walls at last. Then the havens were laid in ruin, and the tower of Barad Nimras cast down, and the most part of Círdan's people were slain or enslaved. But some went aboard ship and escaped by sea. Among them was Erenion Gil-galad, son of Fingon, whom his father had sent to the havens after the Dagor Bragolach. And they made a refuge for all that could come hither, and they kept a foothold also at the mouth of Sirion. And there many light swift ships lay hid in the creeks and waters, where the reeds were dense as a forest. And when Turgon heard of this, he sent again his messengers to Sirion's mouth, and besought the aid of Círdan the shipwright. At the bidding of Turgon, Círdan built 7 swift ships. Say that 5 times fast. And they sailed out into the west, towards the Undying Lands. Just to be clear, towards the Undying Lands, into the west. Excuse me, I lost my place. Sorry. And they sailed out into the west, but no tiding of them ever came back to Balar, save of one, and the last. The mariners of that ship toiled long in the sea, returning at last in despair. They foundered in a great storm within sight of the coast of Middle-earth, but one of them was saved by Ulmo from the wrath of Osse. Osse is one of the Maiar from the Undying Lands. And the waves bore him up and cast him ashore in Nevrast. His name was Voronwe, and he was one of those that Turgon sent forth as messengers from Gondolin. Voronwe is important. You should remember his name. Now the thought of Morgoth dwelt ever upon Turgon, for Turgon had escaped him, of all his foes, that one whom had most desired to take or to destroy. And that thought troubled him, and marred his victory. For Turgon, of the mighty house of Fingolfin, was now by right king of all the Noldor, and Morgoth feared and hated the house of Fingolfin, because they had friendship of Ulmo, his foe. For those that maybe don't remember, Ulmo is the Valar that kind of helps humanity and the elves out when the other Valar will not. And because of the wounds that Fingolfin gave him with his sword. Oh, sorry, that was part of one sentence. Hang on. Morgoth feared and hated the house of Fingolfin, because they had friendship with Ulmo his foe, and because of the wounds that Fingolfin gave him with his sword. And most of all his kin Morgoth feared Turgon, for of old in Valinor his eye had lighted upon him. And whenever he drew near, a shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time yet lay hidden. For in some time that yet lay hidden from Turgon, ruin should come to him. Therefore Hurin was brought back before Morgoth, and Morgoth knew that he had friendship with the king of Gondolin. But Hurin defied him, and mocked him. Then Morgoth cursed Hurin, and Morwen, and their offspring, and set a doom upon them of darkness and sorrow. And taking Hurin from prison, he set him in a chair of stone, upon a high place of Thangorodrim. There he was bound by the power of Morgoth, and Morgoth, standing beside him, cursed him again, and said, "Sit now there, and look out upon the lands where evil and despair shall come upon those whom thou lovest. Thou hast dared to mock me, and to question the power of Melkor, master of the fates of Arda. Therefore with my eyes thou shalt see, and with my ears thou shalt hear. And never shalt thou move from this place until all is fulfilled unto its bitter end." And even so it came to pass. But it is not said that Hurin asked ever of Morgoth for either mercy or death, for himself or any of his kin. By the command of Morgoth, the orcs of great labor gathered all the bodies of those who had fallen in the great battle, and all their harness and weapons, and piled them in a great mound in the midst of Anfauglith. And it is said that it was like a hill that could be seen from afar. Haud en Dengrin, the elves name it, the hill of slain, and Haud en Nirnaeth, the hill of tears. But grass came there, and grew again long and green upon the hill, alone in all that desert that Morgoth had made. And no creature of Morgoth trod thereafter upon the earth beneath which the swords of the Eldar and the Edain crumbled to rust. I will stop there for today. I know this was a short one, but the next one, chapter 21 of Turin Turambar, let's just say Tolkien has his own 300-page book written about this, made from extended notes by his son Christopher Tolkien. The next chapter is roughly 26 pages. It may be another two-parter. It may be another 2.5-hour stream. We will see. I haven't quite yet decided how we want to do this. Thank you all so much for joining. Folks on YouTube, thank you for being here. If the next video is out, feel free to click on to the next one. There is a playlist of this. If you would like to join live, again, we stream every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I think it is 4 p.m. GMT. Potentially 5. I'm really bad at time zones. Sorry. Thank you all so much. I will see you next time.